Caroline Sunshine is the Deputy Director of Communications for the Trump campaign. Caroline, how are you?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm grateful you're here. Let's talk about Elon. What happened last night, and why did you guys decide to do that interview and not go on Meet the Press or Face the Nation?
Well, because we're not Kamala Harris, and we're happy to take questions anytime, any place, anywhere. You watched President Trump just last week for over an hour, take questions from the liberal mainstream media. A week before that, he was at the National Association of Black Journalists. This is also a man who, the entire time he's been in the political arena, will take questions anytime, any place, anywhere. Obviously, he's used X back when it was Twitter. I mean, really, so artistically. There's been few who've used Twitter, I think, as effective as Donald J. Trump, now being back on X. And, it was I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it, but it was such an interesting conversation and such a testament, I think, to the intellectual caliber of both of these men. I saw Greg Gutfeld post about this on X, that just to have a candidate for office who's capable of having a freewheeling conversation where it whines on everything from, like the nuances of American energy policy to EV vehicles to freedom of speech, to all kinds of things, right? Like Kamala Harris couldn't do that for 5 minutes. Actually, a lot of people in our politics couldn't do that for 5 minutes. But Donald Trump's always been this anti-establishment figure. He's always been an outsider to the system. I think the same of Elon Musk. And so, we're not overly calculating here at the Trump campaign. We don't have to coddle our candidate or, think about how to perfectly present them to the world. We're just lucky that we have Donald J. Trump as our leader. And so there's just a really interesting conversation between two geniuses.
I am certain that Kamala will not do an interview for the next 80 days until the election. Why would she? Mm-hmm. And no one in the media will press her to. She doesn't need to, and she won't. What is the campaign to do with that? Your campaign?
Yeah, and that's such an indictment, by the way, of the liberal mainstream media. Because the same liberal mainstream media that for the last 4 years told the American people Joe Biden's fine, he's sharp as a tack, he's doing cartwheels, don't worry about anything, is the same liberal mainstream media that does have the power to force Kamala Harris to sit down, take questions, do a press conference. I mean, this is their job. Like, they're completely derelict in their duty. But so it is. It just can't be overstated. Like, what an indictment. I mean, they literally could. They could band together and say, hey, you have 22 days, and she hasn't taken she said a couple of gaggles. That's light work. Like, President Trump does that every day. Like, she hasn't sat down for a single tough interview or press conference, and it's really actually shame on the liberal mainstream media for letting her get away with it, although my suspicion is that they're actually quite content to let her continue getting away with that because they know what we know, which is that when she does have to sit for a tough interview or do a press conference, it's like the castle is going to crumble again, But the larger point to be made is that I think you and I both know this. Anytime you run as the Republican candidate for president, it's really actually not the Republican candidate. It's the anti-establishment candidate. When you run as the anti-establishment candidate for president, as Donald J. Trump has always run as and continues to run as this cycle, you're never running against just the Democrat nominee. You're always running against the liberal mainstream media and swamp apparatus that kicks in and chooses their candidate and works overtime to get them elected. And I think what you're watching happen right now is the same thing that happened in 2016, where Kamala Harris is kind of getting the Hillary Clinton treatment. And I think it's because the Democrat Party and liberal mainstream media actually have such a low opinion of Americans. I don't think they think Americans are very smart. I think they kind of still look down their noses at places like flyover country and battleground states, and they think that if they throw Beyonce up on the stage or Megan Thee Stallion or whatever it is, they can take somebody who's fundamentally unlikable and fundamentally far more liberal than the rest of the country. I mean, this is a woman who has Kamala Harris is a woman who has a policy platform that reads like a wish list for MS-13 criminals, gangs, thugs, Greta Thunberg, the like. I mean, take your pick. You can take the woman out of San Francisco. You can't take San Francisco out of the woman. She would turn this country into San Francisco. I happen to come from the failed state of California, so I know this better than anyone. But like I said, you always know those are the dynamics that you're up against. And so you watch what President Trump did in 2016 and what he'll continue to do this time around, which is just keep bringing the truth.
What do you make?
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you make? What do you make of the critique that the Trump campaign, which you are in, has not yet, or took too long at least, to find their footing and to find the right messaging against Kamala, which is we need, because we had like 20 years to learn all about Hillary, and we had at least a normal campaign length to know about Joe, and we have 80 days to get people to know about Kamala. So were you slow on the messaging?
Well, Kamala's a chameleon, isn't she? Nobody knows who she is. She changes who she is based off of which crowd she's in front of. If she's in Atlanta, all of a sudden she's speaking a little differently than she usually speaks. If she's in Wisconsin, now she's changing her position on XYZ. Take your pick. But that's actually because you do know who Kamala Harris is. She's no different than Hillary Clinton. She's no different than Barack Obama. She has been party to the Biden-Harris administration, and every failure of, Joe Biden's is absolutely squarely on her shoulders. Take your pick, right? I mean, this is a woman who wears a $62,000 Tiffany necklace around her neck every day and will get up there and say, this is a direct quote from her, that Bidenomics is working. It's great. She's super proud of it. It's never been better. Meanwhile, the average American family, it's costing them $28,000 extra dollars a year just to afford the cost of living, and those wages haven't gone up. But also, she was the last person in the room for all of Joe Biden's decisions. She's proud of that, too. For example, the abysmal withdrawal of Afghanistan. Let's not forget. Kamala Harris said she was the last person in the room, signed off on that decision, thought it was a good one. But she's not Joe Biden, and we don't treat her like Joe Biden. She's entirely different. She's far more liberal, far more extreme. As I said, take the woman out of San Francisco, can't take San Francisco out of her. But, you do know who she is. She's no different than every career politician you've ever seen. She's never held a private sector job in her life. She's spent more time running for office than she's done anything else in her life. She's a career politician. Maybe she goes by a different name. Maybe she wears a different color pantsuit. But you do know her. And so we intend to make sure that voters do keep knowing the truth about who Kamala Harris is, even though every day that seems to change. But I don't think she's going to be able to flip-flop. At least for us, we're not going to let her flip-flop her way or chameleon her way out of having to face the fact that when you run for president, again, the American people are smarter than the liberal mainstream media gives them credit for. And also, it's not all about Kamala Harris. I think there's a liberal mainstream media narrative that it's all about her, but it is still, every day that goes by, and I think you know this well, but a lot of people in media don't, not everybody's consuming political news all the time and watching every little movement and development. A lot of Americans are just living their lives, and what their lives are right now is the issues most important to them are the economy, inflation, and immigration. And what their lives look a lot like is when they're going to fill up their gas tank, it's $4 to $5 a gallon. When they're going to the grocery store and they're like, wow, I didn't buy alcohol, I didn't buy paper towels, I didn't buy meat, why is my grocery bill $150? Like, that is a very tough reality for a lot of people. I get text messages and emails all day long saying as much. I mean, telling me, hey, baby formula 2 years ago, $22 a package. Now it's $45 a package. I'm kind of okay, but how am I affording this? I'm thinking for people who are worse off than me, how are they affording this? So some of that reality doesn't change. And we intend to still keep the focus on how President Trump can make America great again and fight for the forgotten men and women of this country, because we know Kamala Harris won't. We know the liberal mainstream media won't. And we think that's, the right thing to do. And we also think it's a winning message.
So we're talking with Caroline Sunshine, community deputy director of communications for the Trump campaign. They're running her as Obama 2.0 in every way. We played some clips earlier of some people at a rally, and they said, why are you supporting her? She said, well, I need to keep my rights. I need my rights, and I don't want the government to take away my bank account. I don't even know what they're talking about there. One woman said, I'm a transgender man who's gay, and they want to take away my rights. We play those clips, and you're like, okay, well, that's the Kamala base. Okay, fine. We can write those off. They're going to vote for him. And people are like, well, we got to reach the independents, right? The undecided. I don't know who could be undecided, but we got to reach those people, and we got to talk about the issues. We got to talk about the issues. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, and I think that's probably right. But then I'm also like, man, do people care about the issues, or do they just want hope? Do they just want Obama? Do they just want Kamala, they just want, something aspirational. They want joy, as they're characterizing their campaign. Or do people actually vote on the issues?
I think it's always a mix of both, right? And that's what you have in Donald J. Trump. That's always actually been Donald J. Trump's appeal, is he's talked about the right issues, because it's not just about talking about the right issues, it's about actually caring about the right issues, like the border, like inflation, like the economy, which President Trump, I always think, deserves so much credit for bringing immigration into the forefront of American public policy. Both parties for years ignored that issue. But then it's also about authenticity and persona and to your point, yeah, I think we're very aware that people don't just vote solely on the issues, but they vote on authenticity, and Kamala Harris has none of that. And that's where I say you just watch her getting the Hillary Clinton treatment of a liberal mainstream media trying to take something that is fundamentally inauthentic and doing its best to give her the, Hollywood treatment or whatever it is. And while that might resonate with a very narrow base of people, as you just pointed out, her constituency really is San Francisco and New York City. And what you find out with Kamala Harris is, when you see clips like that, is you're just reminded of the reason that when she ran for president back in 2020, she couldn't crack 2% in her own party's primary. She couldn't make it out of Iowa. She had her career pretty much ended on that debate stage by Tulsi Gabbard in 45 seconds. And that is because, again, fundamentally who she is at her core is just far too liberal and out of touch for where the average American's at, certainly for where the forgotten men and women are at, and where that silent majority is at in this country. You really can't forget about that silent majority base. Sometimes they don't show up in the polls. Sometimes they're quiet about their opinions, but they're often loud when they vote. And I think you're going to see that happen again in 2024.
Obviously, all the clips of when Joe was like, is he going to go or not go? And there were people on MSNBC saying, well, if he goes, the worst person to replace her is Kamala Harris. She's just awful. That was just a couple weeks ago on MSNBC. And now, and I'm sure you saw the CBS tweet with no tax on tips. And when Kamala proposed no tax on tips the other day, they said, oh, what a brilliant, wonderful proposal. This would help low-income servers. It would be great. And when Trump did it, it would add $250 billion to the deficit. Right. Same media that you're running up against.